For centuries, it has rested in a climate-controlled case, protected from the ravages of time. It is a simple piece of linen cloth, 14 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. Yet this single artifact holds a power that few objects in history can claim. It is known as the Shroud of Turin. Faintly imprinted on its surface is the ghostly, full-length image of a man who appears to have been brutally scourged, crowned with thorns, and crucified. For millions, this is not just any man. They believe this is the very burial cloth that wrapped the body of Jesus of Nazareth after his death. It is a relic of immense religious significance, a direct physical link to one of the most pivotal moments in human history. The story of the shroud is a story of faith colliding with science, of belief wrestling with proof. Is it a miraculous artifact, a silent witness to the resurrection? Or is it an ingenious medieval forgery, a work of art so clever that it has fooled generations of the faithful and baffled modern science? This question has echoed through the halls of cathedrals and laboratories alike. The Shroud of Turin forces us to confront the very nature of what we believe and how we know what we know. It is a mystery that has captivated popes, kings, scientists, and skeptics. Its journey through time is as mysterious as the image it bears, a puzzle that continues to challenge our understanding of the past. The significance of the shroud transcends its potential religious importance. It has become a scientific curiosity of the highest order. Researchers from countless disciplines have aimed their most advanced instruments at this ancient linen. They have analyzed its fibers, its pollen grains, its blood stains, and the mysterious chemical properties of the image itself. Each new test, each new discovery, seems only to deepen the enigma. For every piece of evidence that points to its authenticity, a counter-argument arises, suggesting a more down-to-earth explanation. The shroud is a paradox, an object that seems both ancient and impossibly modern, both sacred and profoundly challenging. As we stand here today, the debate rages on. New technologies continue to offer new ways to probe its secrets, yet a final, definitive answer remains just out of reach. Is this the real burial cloth of Jesus, or is it something else entirely? The documented history of the Shroud of Turin does not begin in 1st century Jerusalem. Instead, it emerges from the shadows of the Middle Ages. Our first certain glimpse of this remarkable cloth is in the small town of Lire, France, around the year 1355. A French knight named Geoffroy de Charny put the shroud on public display, claiming it was the authentic burial cloth of Christ. The exhibition caused an immediate sensation, drawing pilgrims from far and wide. But it also drew suspicion. The local bishop, Pierre d'Arcy, was deeply skeptical. He investigated the matter and later wrote a memorandum to the Pope, declaring the shroud to be a clever painting, a cunning sleight of hand, created to fleece money from the faithful. This early controversy set the stage for centuries of debate. Where had the shroud been for the 1300 years between the crucifixion and its appearance in France? Some historians propose a fascinating theory, linking the shroud to another legendary relic known as the Mandelion of Edessa. This was a cloth said to bear the miraculous image of Jesus' face. It was venerated in the Byzantine Empire for centuries before it vanished during the sack of Constantinople in 1204. Proponents of this theory suggest the shroud, folded to show only the face, was the Mandelion. This could explain the historical gap, but it remains a theory, a tantalizing but unproven connection to a deeper past. The shroud's journey was far from over. After its time in Lire, it passed into the hands of the powerful House of Savoy in 1453. This royal family would become its custodians for the next 5 centuries. They housed it in a dedicated chapel in their capital of Chambéry, France. It was here, in 1532, that the shroud faced one of its greatest threats. A catastrophic fire broke out in the chapel, and the silver casket containing the relic began to melt. A brave group of men rushed into the inferno to save it, dousing it with water. The shroud survived, but not unscathed. It now bears the burn marks and water stains from that fateful night, scars that have become part of its unique story. In 1578, the House of Savoy moved their capital, and the shroud along with it, to the city of Turin in Italy. It is from this city that the shroud gets its modern name. For more than 400 years, it has remained in Turin, under the care of the city's cathedral. The power of the shroud lies in the haunting image it contains. It is a faint, sepia-toned impression of the front and back of a naked man. The figure is tall and muscular and bearded with long hair. But it is the details of his injuries that have convinced so many that this is the body of Jesus as described in the Gospels. The image shows a man who has been brutally tortured. Across the back, shoulders, and legs are more than 100 small, dumbbell-shaped wounds, consistent with the type of whip or flagrum used by Roman soldiers. These marks suggest a violent scourging, a punishment that was a common prelude to crucifixion under Roman law. The evidence of crucifixion is even more striking. The image on the shroud shows a large round wound on the man's wrist, not his palm. This is a detail of profound anatomical accuracy. For centuries, artists depicted the nails of the crucifixion passing through the palms of Jesus' hands. However, we now know that a nail in the palm could not support the weight of a body. A nail driven through the wrist, in an area known as destot space, would be strong enough to hold a person to a cross. This anatomical precision, unknown to most medieval artists, is a powerful argument for those who believe in the shroud's authenticity. It suggests knowledge that a forger from that era would be unlikely to possess. The injuries to the head and face tell a further story of suffering. There are multiple puncture wounds across the scalp and forehead, consistent with a cap or helmet of thorns being pressed onto the head, rather than a simple circlet as is often depicted in art. The face itself is swollen, with a bruised cheek and what appears to be a broken nose. On the side of the man's chest, there is a large, gaping wound. This corresponds to the Gospel of John, which describes a Roman soldier piercing Jesus' side with a spear after his death to confirm he had expired. A flow of a blood-like substance and a clear, watery fluid is visible from this wound, matching the biblical description of blood and water. For believers, this is an overwhelming convergence of evidence. The shroud does not just show a crucified man. It shows a man crucified in a specific manner, with injuries that align perfectly with the unique and detailed accounts of Jesus' passion found in the four Gospels. The scourging, the crown of thorns, the nail in the wrist, the spear in the side, all are there. To them, the odds of a medieval forger creating a work with such incredible biblical and anatomical accuracy are infinitesimally small. For these millions of faithful, the man on the shroud can be no one else. He is the man from the Gospels, his suffering etched onto this linen cloth for all time. The case for the shroud's authenticity took a dramatic leap forward with the advent of modern forensic science. Scientists who have examined the reddish-brown stains on the cloth have made some startling claims. In the 1970s and 80s, a team of Swiss and Italian researchers declared that these stains were not paint or dye, but were in fact real human blood. Subsequent tests performed by various independent researchers have seemed to support this conclusion. One of the most compelling findings from these studies is the blood type. Multiple analyses have concluded that the blood on the shroud is of the type AB, a relatively rare blood group found in only about 3 to 5% of the world's population. The rarity of this blood type is significant, but its geographical distribution is even more intriguing. While AB is uncommon globally, it is found with a slightly higher frequency among populations in the Middle East, including in modern-day Israel and Palestine. This finding, for supporters, is another piece of the puzzle that fits perfectly. It places the man on the shroud squarely in the geographical region where Jesus lived and died. It seems to be a subtle but powerful piece of forensic evidence that connects the ancient cloth not just to a human being, but to a human being from a specific part of the world, consistent with the biblical narrative. Further analysis of the blood has yielded even more specific information. In 2017, a team of Italian scientists published a study claiming they had identified nanometer-sized particles of creatinine and ferritin attached to the blood fibrils. They argued that these specific nanoparticles are found in the blood of individuals who have suffered extreme trauma and torture. According to their research, a healthy person's blood would not contain these particles in such a state. This suggests the man on the shroud died a violent and painful death, which aligns perfectly with the story of the crucifixion. It points not just to blood, but to the blood of a victim of severe suffering. Perhaps the most fundamental conclusion from these blood tests is the confirmation of human DNA. Several studies have claimed to have successfully extracted and analyzed genetic material from the shroud. While the samples are often degraded and potentially contaminated, some researchers have reported finding DNA from a human male. For those who believe in the shroud's authenticity, this is the ultimate proof. The stains are not pigment. They are the real blood of a real human man, a man of Middle Eastern descent with the rare AB blood type, who was tortured to death. For them, the scientific evidence whispers a name: Jesus. When scientists approach an object as unique as the Shroud of Turin, they use sophisticated techniques to analyze its secrets without causing damage. To determine if the stains are truly blood, they begin with non-invasive methods. One simple approach is microspectrophotometry. This involves shining tiny beams of light onto the stains and measuring what light is reflected or absorbed. Real blood has a very specific spectral signature, different from common red pigments. Early tests on the shroud revealed a signature that closely matched hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in our blood. To confirm these findings, researchers used the tape lift technique, pressing adhesive tape onto the cloth to pull off tiny fibers for examination. Under a microscope, these fibers are treated with chemical reagents. Tests look for albumin, a protein in blood serum, and porphyrin, a component of hemoglobin. Positive results provide stronger evidence that this substance has blood's chemical components. Identifying blood type and DNA requires advanced molecular biology techniques. Scientists use immunological tests, introducing antibodies designed to bind to specific antigens. If both A and B antibodies bind, it confirms the blood is type AB. This is challenging on an ancient contaminated artifact. Proteins may be degraded after centuries, making signals weak and difficult to interpret. Extracting and analyzing DNA is the most complex step. It involves polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, which takes tiny DNA fragments and makes millions of copies, amplifying them for sequencing. Scientists look for Y chromosome markers to confirm the sample is from a male, and analyze mitochondrial DNA for lineage and geographic origins. However, the great challenge is contamination. Over centuries, countless people have touched, prayed over, and wept on it, leaving their own DNA behind. Sorting original DNA from modern contamination is a monumental task. For every scientific claim supporting the shroud's authenticity, there is a strong and persistent voice of skepticism. Many scientists remain unconvinced that the stains on the cloth are blood at all. They point out that the reddish color of the stains is unusual for ancient blood, which typically turns black or dark brown over time. They propose that a clever medieval artist could have used a mixture of pigments, such as red ochre and tempera, to simulate the appearance of blood. Skeptics argue that the tests confirming blood were either flawed, misinterpreted, or unable to be replicated by other independent research teams. The debate over the very nature of the stains remains one of the central points of contention. Even if one accepts that the stains are blood, the conclusions drawn from them face serious challenges. The finding of AB blood type, for example, is questioned by critics who argue that testing such an old and contaminated sample is fraught with peril. They suggest that bacterial or fungal growth on the linen over the centuries could create proteins that mimic human antigens, leading to a false positive result for the AB type. The same criticism is leveled against the DNA findings. Skeptics argue it's nearly impossible to distinguish the DNA of the man on the shroud from the DNA of all the monks, priests, and pilgrims who have handled it throughout history. The original genetic signal may be lost in a sea of contamination. The 2017 study claiming the discovery of nanoparticles from a trauma victim has also been met with significant doubt. Other scientists have argued that these so-called nanoparticles are not extraordinary at all. They contend that similar particles can be found in many different organic substances and are not exclusively indicative of severe trauma. Furthermore, critics question the methodology and the lack of peer review from a broader scientific community outside of the pro-authenticity camp. They see it as another example of researchers interpreting ambiguous data through the lens of a pre-existing belief in the shroud's authenticity, a classic case of confirmation bias. Perhaps the most damning critique comes from forensic experts who have studied the patterns of the blood flows themselves. In 2018, a study using forensic anthropology and bloodstain pattern analysis concluded that the flows on the shroud are not realistic. The researchers used a mannequin and real and synthetic blood to simulate the flows from crucifixion wounds. They found that the rivulets of blood on the shroud's arms, chest, and back are too neat and consistent. They do not match how real blood would flow, trickle, and clot on a complex, moving human body. Their conclusion was blunt. The patterns on the shroud are more likely the work of an artist's hand than the result of a real crucifixion. The journey of the Shroud of Turin from a contested relic in a small French town to a global icon is a story of changing technology and evolving faith. For most of its history, the faint image on the cloth was difficult to see with the naked eye. It was an object of veneration, but its full, startling detail remained hidden. This all changed in 1898. An amateur Italian photographer named Secondo Pia was given permission to photograph the shroud during a rare public exhibition. As he developed the glass plate negatives in his darkroom, he was stunned by what he saw. The image on his negative was not a ghostly abstract, but a clear, detailed, and lifelike portrait of a man. The photographic negative had reversed the lights and darks of the shroud image, revealing it to be, in essence, a photographic negative itself. The faint markings on the cloth became a positive image, filled with depth and clarity that no one had ever seen before. This discovery was a watershed moment. It electrified the public and transformed the scientific debate. How could a medieval forger have created a perfect photographic negative centuries before the invention of photography? This single event propelled the shroud into the modern era, turning it from a simple object of faith into a profound scientific mystery. The man in the negative became an icon for a new scientific age. The Catholic Church's relationship with the shroud has been cautious and has evolved over time. For centuries, while the House of Savoy owned it, the Church allowed its veneration without ever making an official proclamation on its origin. Popes would pray before it and endorse it as a powerful symbol, but they stopped short of declaring it an authentic relic. This careful stance allows for both faith and science to coexist. It permits believers to find deep spiritual meaning in the image while also allowing and even encouraging rigorous scientific investigation. The Church frames the shroud not as an object that demands belief, but as one that invites contemplation on Christ's suffering. In recent decades, public displays of the shroud have become major global events, carefully managed by the Vatican. These exhibitions, or ostensions, draw millions of pilgrims to Turin. The shroud is no longer kept folded in a silver casket. It is now preserved unrolled in a high-tech, bulletproof case filled with an inert gas to prevent decay. These modern displays, broadcast worldwide, have cemented the shroud's status as a universal icon. Whether one sees it as the authentic burial cloth of Jesus or a masterful forgery, its power to capture the human imagination is undeniable. It has become a focal point for discussions about history, science, art, and the very essence of faith in the modern world. The single greatest scientific challenge to the shroud's authenticity came in 1988. The Vatican gave permission for a small sample to be cut from the edge of the cloth for radiocarbon dating. The sample was divided and sent to 3 of the world's leading laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. The process of radiocarbon dating measures the decay of carbon-14, a radioactive isotope, to determine the age of organic materials. The results from all 3 labs were in close agreement. They dated the linen of the Shroud of Turin to a period between 1260 and 1390 AD. This result placed the shroud's origin squarely in the Middle Ages, precisely when it first appeared in historical records in Lille, France. For many, this was the final nail in the coffin. The hard data from one of science's most trusted dating methods seemed to prove definitively that the shroud was a medieval creation, not a first-century artifact. The case, it seemed, was closed. The shroud was a brilliant and mysterious forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. Skeptics felt vindicated, and the scientific consensus for many years was that the shroud was not authentic. The results were published in the prestigious journal Nature, and for a time the debate seemed to be over. However, the story did not end there. Proponents of the shroud's authenticity immediately began to question the validity of the 1988 test. They argued that the sample was taken from a corner of the shroud that had been repaired and rewoven in the Middle Ages. They point to the fire of 1532 and centuries of handling as events that could have contaminated the cloth with newer carbon, skewing the results. This contamination argument suggests that bacteria, smoke residue, and cotton fibers from the medieval repair patch could have made the sample appear much younger than the main body of the cloth. They argue that a single test on a sample from a compromised edge cannot be used to date the entire artifact. This debate between the radiocarbon dating results and the contamination theory is the central scientific battleground today. Some recent chemical analyses have suggested that the sample area is indeed chemically different from the rest of the cloth, lending some support to the contamination hypothesis. However, the original radiocarbon scientists stand by their results, stating that they took extensive measures to clean the samples of any potential contaminants before testing. They remain confident in their medieval dating, and so the mystery endures. We are left with 2 conflicting sets of data, powerful forensic evidence suggesting a real crucified man, and powerful radiometric evidence suggesting a medieval creation. So, what are we to believe? Is the Shroud of Turin a direct physical link to the historical Jesus, a silent witness to the most important event in Christianity? Or is it the masterpiece of an unknown medieval genius, an object of faith built on a foundation of deception? The evidence is complex, compelling, and contradictory. It pushes the limits of our science and challenges the foundations of our faith. The shroud remains an enigma, wrapped in mystery, refusing to give up its final secret. And perhaps that is why it continues to fascinate us. It forces